going to have another bill for juvenile addiction treatment by the community, within the community. Mary, your name's on the top.
Thank you. Just to remind you all, some of you have heard this many times, but Representative Mendive and I worked very hard with Pastor Tim for 2 years to get a bill through, and let me tell you, every committee, it was a circus, an absolute crazy circus. We got the bill through to allow private rehab programs, drug and alcohol treatment programs for teenagers under 18 and under, or under 18. Every special interest group in the Boise area, and there are hundreds, came out to oppose this bill because all these terrible things were going to happen if a private group was allowed to do this. And let me underscore, this was a parental choice bill. The parents would choose the program. The parents would pay for the program. It took no state money, no federal money, not at all. We finally got it through, and the governor vetoed it. That was last year at the end of the session. He had just signed the Fairness in Women's Sports bill, which is to not allow males to play in female sports, and I was the Senate sponsor of that bill. And he signed the birth certificate bill, which allows the information on, keeps the information on your birth certificate as from when you were born, not later if you decide your gender has changed, and then that will. Senator Vick was the Senate sponsor of that bill. He signed those two bills, and they were both very controversial, and then he vetoed the teenage rehab drug and alcohol bill. And we think that it was a give back to the liberal community, and it didn't help that Pastor Tim was suing the governor at that time.
And the good senator did a very good job of explaining what happened. The thing that's amazing is all these groups show up and they say the state is handling this. We can do this. We're worried about these children. We don't want to take the risk of putting them in a private care facility that the state can't control. That's what this was all about state control. So they act like they're going to come up with these things. We're just that close to a solution, and nothing has changed. These children are still out there. Nobody's doing anything for them. They rallied against us, but they didn't rally to help those children. And in the end, that was their claim, but that's not what really happens. These children, again, I pointed out earlier that I attend this church, but those of you who are familiar with what happens here, on Sunday mornings, the people that graduate from the drug and alcohol interdiction program get up and give their testimony, how they got there. And believe me, a very high percentage of these people started before they were 18. It doesn't just suddenly, when you turn 18, then you start taking drugs and have problems. If you can get involved in these children's lives before they get pregnant, before they're in jail and do some things, it's a benefit to everybody. And we really did try. We fought the good fight. Pastor Tim and I met with a number of people trying to, and they just played us, and we thought we were being played, but it was the Christian thing to do, to make our case to these folks. And at the end of the day, we got vetoed, and the reality is not much has changed down there to bring that bill forward again. There are other fish to fry this time, and I guess I don't have a solution for that. We thought we had one, and it didn't happen. So anyway, that's the reality.
I do want to just add something, because there's a lot of information coming out right now, although it's being suppressed by media, about the effects of marijuana on the developing brain. It's devastating, and I would only imagine that probably 99.9, if not 100% of the kids that should be in the Pastor Tim's rehab program started on marijuana and smoke it frequently, and it interrupts their development of their brain. So we have a controversial, I can't believe I'm saying it's controversial, a bill that's an amendment to the state constitution that you would all get to vote on before it would ever happen. But this amendment says that illegal drugs in Idaho that are illegal now will stay illegal. And of course it has exceptions for clinical trial drugs that are new coming out for medical reasons and right to try and all of that. That all is included in this amendment. It passed the Senate with enough votes, 2/3 of a vote, 2/3 of the body of the Senate voted in favor of it, and it is over in the House where we hear that it will not pass. If it did pass the House, it would be on the general election ballot in November of 2022, and you would all get to vote on it. Look around us. Do you remember the old definition of insanity? Look around us. Oregon, Washington, Montana now just legalized recreational use of marijuana. Utah has medical marijuana, and that's a slippery slope that will probably end up very soon into recreational. So, and I'm told by legislators out of Montana that even their legal dispensaries for medical marijuana, more marijuana goes out the back door than goes out the front door, because the black market is alive and well in these dispensaries because there's a big tax on marijuana. And so the black market doesn't go away. So not only do you have kids smoking this psychoactive drug, do you know that in 1970, and I will tell you, when I was in college, I inhaled. I didn't use it very often. It didn't feel right to me, but I tried it. It was, the marijuana of the 1970s was less than 2% THC. The marijuana today is more than 25% THC. Just think of the brain chemistry. And the developing brain is defined as up to 24 years old. So this is no small social impact. And Idaho can stand alone and say, we're keeping it illegal, we are keeping our laws the way they are, and we will not end up like Oregon.
I'd just like to briefly touch on something that Mary said about this bill. I don't have, I'm not going to speak from the use side of things, but more some of the opposition to the bill is based on reference in there to the Food and Drug Administration, because what this does, if you read the bill, it's very clear about carving out the ability for doctors and other institutions to still have a pathway for using these types of drugs in derivative form, or however science gets around to finding benefits for people, to still be able to legally prescribe things that are going to benefit people. It really is just tackling the recreational issue. And there is some concern from some folks about linking a bill in Idaho to the federal Food and Drug Administration, but I ask those people to exercise a bit of caution from the fact that when we're talking about prescription drugs, they all have to be approved by the FDA. So this isn't about giving the federal government oversight about what can be done and not done with weed in Idaho and things like that. It's about the Food and Drug Administration has to approve or not approve any drugs that are going to be prescribed by medical people to the people that need them. And so that's the only reason that there's the inclusion of the FDA in there. It's not some nefarious plan to hand over state sovereignty to the federal government. It's a requirement if we want to be able to continue to explore any of these drugs, any drugs, in the way that that can make them legally prescribable.
I gotta say something, even though the question wasn't asked about the amendment, because that's the 2/3 of the Senate that voted for the amendment. I'm the 1/3 of the Senate that voted against putting that on the ballot. And although we're not 2/3 of the Senate, but I just felt like you need to hear my perspective on what I felt were real constitutional problems with the amendment. They mentioned the FDA. There's no, in my opinion, a constitution, the state constitution is no place to mention a federal agency. And so I do have a problem with that. I think I do not support legalization of recreational marijuana. Totally opposed to that. But bringing a federal agency into our constitution, I do think, has questions about state sovereignty. Another thing that I was very concerned about, currently our entire constitution is less than 40,000 words. Less than 30,000 words. This one amendment, if you include all of the incorporations by reference, is over 40,000 words. And so it more than doubles the entire length of our Constitution. And you have to read all of the laws that are referenced to understand what the amendment does. And so while I don't support legalization of marijuana, I voted against the amendment because I believe it does damage to our Constitution that will persist. And if at any time the federal government legalizes marijuana, our amendment doesn't do any good anyway, because we've incorporated those laws into our Constitution. And so my opposition to the amendment didn't have anything to do with legalizing marijuana, but to the damage that I felt the amendment did to our Constitution. And before I give the mic back to Mary, I just want to say I'm still friends with Peter and Mary.
And that's the magic of the Senate, because you can be on opposite sides of something on one bill and all together on the other side, on another bill. So we don't burn our bridges. We make sure that we talk to each other. I did want to mention, let me see if I can remember in my memory sheet. I hate it when that happens. It has to do with last year I had a medical marijuana bill. It was called medical cannabis, and it was basically a placeholder. It didn't advance, but which was fine. It was just to get the conversation started. But THC, the active ingredient, one of the active ingredients, the only psychoactive ingredient in marijuana, or the main one that we all know, is THC. And a doctor can prescribe synthetic THC tablets, pills. And when I was a young nurse, I took care of a 12-year-old young man who was ravaged by cancer and could not keep anything down, no food or sustenance down, because of the chemotherapy he was getting. And he was in a clinical trial, this is decades ago, a clinical trial for THC pills, and it worked very, very well for him. But research now shows that THC is very good for that, but in pill form, not in the smoke form, but in pill form. But it has little to any medicinal effect on almost any other medical problem. And so what you're hearing from people, I have this ache and this pain or whatever, and I need to smoke my marijuana, that's more the placebo effect than it is, because there's no verified research that shows that. CBD, however, which is another component that's in marijuana and is not psychoactive and does not cause anyone to get high, that does seem to have some medicinal effects, but that's legal. It's legal up to 0.3% of THC. Pardon me? Did I say? Right, and so it can have a tiny bit of THC in it, but most of the CBD that you can buy is just as effective, and it has 0 THC. So the bill, the amendment that we have, allows legal hemp for industrial reasons, and CBD is from hemp, and CBD is legal as well, with that limited amount of THC in it. So You can get the CBD, you can get THC by prescription in pills from your doctor if you need it. So the need for medical marijuana is being overblown and sensationalized by the very, and listen to this, the very, very wealthy cannabis group across the nation, across the world, that is owned by some of the wealthiest people in the world. And they are using it to change cultures and to come in and destroy our systems. So please be careful for what you believe and what you look for the research. Do you know the name Alex Berenson? He's a reporter. He's actually not even conservative, but he's been on the Tucker Carlson show often about the COVID-19 issue. And he did a deep dive into very current research on marijuana, and his wife is a forensic clinical psychiatrist who works with violent criminals. Anyway, he has a new book out. It's Tell Your Children about marijuana, about the dangers of marijuana. And you can get it on Amazon. I just got it on Audible and was listening to it last night on the way home. And it is amazing the research that we are not being told about that shows the damages.